have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Hudson Harmon, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, we are bringing intelligence to the discussion with amazing guests like tonight. We bring you David Adair. But before we introduce our guest, let me give you some announcements. Of course, as you know, we're broadcasting from late night in the Midlands. Also, we are broadcasting from Black Swamp Digital Radio, both located in the United States of America. We are also broadcasting, that's right, there's more to come, deprogrammed in London. That's right, London, UK, and that's European theater. Also, not to mention World Pirate Radio Network in South Korea, Seoul, South Korea, and YouTube Nation. That's the coolest part. So we're getting them all. Now, let me give you a quick announcement. I already told you about today's guest. Tomorrow, we bring you Roger Stone, the maker of Kings. That's right. He's responsible for 10 Republican presidential candidates. He started with 72 with the committee to re-elect Nixon, all the way to literally producing the Donald Trump campaign and putting him into office. His title is Advisor to President Donald J. Trump. Well, Thursday, we have best-selling author and alien abductee Whitley Strieber. Next week, we're going 4 days, if not 5, if I can make Friday happen. And after that, this will be 5 days a week, folks. Now, I was speaking to my guest offline, so might as well bring him, or off air. Let me bring him in so I can properly introduce him. So this is somebody who's really got a lot to his background. There's some stuff we don't want to say on air, so I'm going to keep it pretty limited, other than saying that he was part and worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence. That should tell you a lot right there. So without further ado, let's bring on Mr. David Adair. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. J. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. Now, I'm sure people are getting all excited. We're going to talk about conspiracies and UFOs and aliens, but we decided we're going to do something different. We're going to talk about a different conspiracy. Ain't that right, Mr. Adair?
I hope so.
Okay. Well, as you heard on August 7th, we had Jerome Corsi, and obviously tomorrow with Roger Stone, this is going to be a big deal. One of the biggest news stories that you cannot get away with, I don't care if you live in another country or you're a Democrat and hate the Republicans or even an establishment Republican, you cannot get away with the fact that billionaire Donald Trump is our president. And whether you love him or hate him, you have to appreciate what he's done for the country. And even if you hate that, you have to at least understand that he blew away 16 Republican candidates and the first female candidate who was, in some people's minds, the person who had the most experience in the federal government. Of course, she carried 30 years of baggage from being the first lady to senator to secretary of state, Mrs. Clinton. However, because of some of that baggage and some of the dirty tricks, she is not the first president. Now, what I was saying off air was exactly what we spent 2 hours with Jerome Corsi on his book, Killing the Deep State. I just told this to David, and I'm going to spit it out in one quick minute, and then I'm going to bring the question to David. Okay, going back before November 2016, when President Donald J. Trump was elected, and he became President-elect Trump, what happened is Hillary Clinton wanted to rig the election with Barack Obama's help. And once she started to see that there might be a chance that Trump would win, she also wanted to gain insurance. That way she could impeach him or use the 25th Amendment, which would find him mentally unfit, which is kind of bizarre if you think about that, because he's pretty fit, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, and doesn't do drugs. So it's kind of hard to say he's mentally unfit. What they did is they hired Fusion GPS, Bud Orr and his wife, to get some dirt on Mr. Trump. Then They needed, of course, the FBI, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, the CIA was involved, all with the blessing of Barack Obama and Mr. Bill Clinton. So they needed somebody to testify in a FISA court. If you don't know what FISA means, it means Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. In short order, it's meant to spy on terrorists without the Constitution, because this basically usurps the Fourth Amendment and allows the government to spy without anybody knowing that they're being spied upon. So they needed somebody to testify, and what they did is James Comey, Andrew McCabe sent Lisa Page, Peter Strzok of the FBI, along with John McCain, that's right, John McCain, over to the United Kingdom, and they hired disgraced MI6 agent and FBI rat Christopher Steele to testify in a FISA court. That's where the Steele dossier comes into play. So they paid him 50 grand. Boom. FISA judge gives a warrant against Carter Page, and now you have someone inserted into Donald Trump's campaign to spy on him. One more little twist to this that I told Jerome Corsi that he didn't know about this. The CIA has a project called UMBRA, UMBRA. UMBRA has basically every nation's digital fingerprint and their respective intelligence agencies. So what they did is they used the FSB, Russia's FSB, digital fingerprint as the country that was meddling, so-called meddling with the elections, when in reality the country that was colluding with Hillary to rig the elections was the United Kingdom. If this surprises you, search it. It's all over the internet. You cannot go a single day without paying attention to the news with this not coming up. Now, if you're watching the Communist News Network or CNN or MSNBC or any of those BS MSM stations, you're not going to get the story. If you want to hear some real news, pay attention to One American News Network. Now, I'm going to flash back to beginning of 2016. And now I'm going to ask you this, David. So we had Donald Trump and 16 candidates, right? Very early on, you had Donald Trump say something about John McCain. He said, he's not a hero. I like people who weren't caught. And John Podesta said it best. A mere mortal would have never survived that. But what happened? His popularity rose and he beat out 16 candidates. Why was he so successful in your mind?
It's as a political force at work that political pundits even admit they have no idea what it is, and it's the force that put Trump in office. They wanted a candidate that could stick a thorn in both parties at the same time, and so they elected Trump as a disruptor, and man, has he delivered every single day. That electorate, only I don't know the exact number, but like 25% of America votes. Well, you just heard from the other 75%, and they moved Trump into place. They moved, 16 candidates, blew them out of the way. Trump didn't get rid of those candidates. That electoral force that went after him removed those candidates and blew through the Electoral College, and now you have Trump as president. And the Democrats don't have a clue what that is. Well, frankly, most Republicans don't either. And it's going to be interesting to see which way that political force is going to move again in the next primary election. So that's what I think happened, and it's still happening, and it's not true. That's a political force that neither party understands, and it's just like a juggernaut. It's going to run through and push what it wants. So it's a buggy ride, y'all. Tighten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
I agree, and there's the what's called the Zip Poll app. I use it all the time to ask America what questions or what guests they'd like to hear. And as a matter of fact, they voted you, Mr. Adair. And
oh my God.
Yeah, 6 million people use it. This was the only poll that predicted without a doubt that Trump would win back as early as February 2016. I've run a lot of polls, not to mention every single day there's somebody polls, because you're allowed to also ask questions or answer, not just ask questions. You could answer questions, and I set my app where it spits out 2 questions a day. If I want to do more, I could answer more because I want to participate in polls. There is not a single day where there is a question. Will there be, from the Democrats, Trump is pissing everyone off. Will there be a decisively blue wave? No. 95% said no. 95% of America says there will be a red wave. Not only will the Democrats not unseat the Republicans will even gain a few more seats. That's what the poll is showing, and that's what the data is showing. So when you said get ready for a bumpy ride, it is going to get bumpy. And one thing that's happening that's kind of scary is what's going on with Brett Kavanaugh. What do you think about that? They're trying to put him in the Supreme Court, and now you have these wild allegations. And if anything was remotely true, he would have lawyered up. And the second accuser, she can't even remember what happened.
That's the thing about all the noise that's made up in Washington, and it's very similar to like UFO community. They make all this noise, but where's the proof?
That's right.
Where's hard evidence? Do you have a spacecraft sitting over here? No. Do you have an alien laying there? No. With Trump, where's all the evidence of conspiracy and collusion?
None. I
hadn't seen any yet. Nothing that you could put in court.
What I've seen is the other side, though. There exists, and that's what Rod Rosenstein just resigned, because he's been stonewalling the Senate in producing documents and testifying about all the details that link, without a doubt, that will in a court 100% in a grand jury indict about 30 people, from Barack Obama to Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. This is like not a conspiracy that's unproven. There is a huge paper trail, including the Treasury check cut by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to pay Christopher Steele. So that exists in a
It's the first time I've ever seen people hurling multiple rocks in a glass house.
Yes.
But they want to investigate, but as they keep investigating and turn the lights on in dark places, the lights are shining back on Democrats as well, if not more. And I try to stay apolitical on all this. I look more at the whole situation. I'm just visiting, passing through, like Mark Twain once said. He was born when Halley's Comet was the closest to Earth, and he died at the exact moment Halley's Comet came back and was closest to Earth. He said he came in on it and he'd leave on it, and he was just visiting. I think that's true.
Didn't Halley's Comet come in 84, 85, 86? I mean, that was the last time I remembered, because I had a really cool skateboard that had Halley's Comet on it.
I think it's 70. I think it's a 76-year cycle.
It is.
Maybe wrong, but
76 or 86, somewhere in that year. But I believe it came in. I mean, I know it came in the 80s. I just don't know exactly when. But I kind of like what you just said about Mark Twain. And to tell you the truth, I've been apolitical up until this Trump thing, because you have an outsider who's in, and it's just the coolest kind of reality show right now. I get so much joy of watching people scramble and trying to get him out. It's
well, they do too.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything quite like this, the way everything's set up. And to answer the question back on Kavanaugh, I've never seen anybody smear campaign so extreme, and the politics of today is just so extreme. I've never seen, when I was a kid, none of the press or politicians would dare be saying the stuff they're doing today.
And when it's happening today, it's happening in 2016, 2017, 2018. It wasn't happening in 2012 the way it's happening now.
No, it's just something fairly recent. And but that new political force that came in to put Trump in office It's a real frustrated force, and doesn't like either party because both parties have betrayed the American people time and time after again. And so it's through sitting around and finally do something, but it never had a real spear to throw. Well, enter Donald Trump, and they looked at him, and he was a perfect shaped spear, and they just threw him, and he went right into office, and it just irritated both parties to no end.
And that is why John McCain was part of the establishment that was trying to rig the election for Hillary. He was one of the people that went with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, what Trump calls the lovely Lisa Page, the FBI attorney, and Peter Strzok, the agent, who went to pay Christopher Steele and bring him over to testify in the FISA court. So like you said, it pissed off both sides of the aisle.
And I think for the first time in many decades, the American public actually won one for themselves. They finally was able to upset both parties simultaneously. And think about it, that would be almost impossible to do. But, buddy, it happened. That's exactly what happened. And now they're still dealing with it. And it'll be how it's going to be real interesting to see how the next general election goes.
I agree with that, and one thing that's a little scary is how far left the Democrats are going, even creating the Democratic Socialists of America. The problem when you have that is you have a National Socialist Party. Well, what was the last National Socialist Party? The Nazi Party.
Yeah, the brown shirt.
That worked out very well, right?
Yeah, well, that's, what's so interesting is the Democrats, the far left will call you a fascist. That's exactly what they are. In psychology, it's transposition. They're calling us or anybody else that don't agree with them. They're calling all of us, that term, and it's actually them. They're the fascists because if you dare to disagree with them, Lord of mercy, they'll physically come at you.
That's true, and unfortunately, I live very close to Maxine Waters District. Thankfully, I'm not in it, but when I was in law school, I was literally in it. I would have to drive into it from Hollywood all the time, and it's pretty scary that if I try to wear a Make America Great Again hat, I will get heckled out of a restaurant. I will get, the finger thrown at me driving, so I can't wear anything, and that's okay because I'm in a very liberal state, but then what happened to the First Amendment? It doesn't seem to apply in California.
No, that's how fascism works. They cannot tolerate. Well, I heard some college students. I was just channel surfing on the internet, came across this YouTube, and it was a professor talking to a class, and he asked them, well, don't y'all want to talk about this? And they said, no. Well, don't you want to discuss anything? No. Well, what do you want us to do? Die.
Wow.
I was sitting there going, dang, wow. I said, gee, that must be a class of brown shirts from 1940s. And it was actually one of the big leading colleges.
That is extremely sad. What do you know the name of the college?
No, I can't. It was one of the Ivy Leagues.
Jeez.
And it was mainstream, big one. Harvard, Yale, one of those.
Harvard,
and I was
Yale,
sitting there going,
Columbia,
wow.
NYU, Brown, Dartmouth. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the big ones, and I was just amazed how rigid they were. They don't even want to. You go to college to learn to debate and discuss and exchange ideas, and you agree to disagree. Buddy, that's not what they want. They don't want to hear that. They'll throw their hands over their heads and go, make noise so they can't hear you. That's a fascist. That is somebody that doesn't even want to discuss their points of view. And you don't have one. If it's not exactly like theirs, they don't want to hear it. And I got news for y'all. That's history repeating itself. That's
it
exactly
really
how.
Yes.
Yeah. That's exactly how the brown shirts got started. And then that led into the Nazi regime. And boy, I tell you, if you don't know history, you are doomed to repeat yourself. And I tell you what, the average American doesn't know squat about anything in any history, let alone ours, world history, know nothing.
Agreed. Now, a good friend of mine who does not do interviews at all, but does do interviews with me, is Michael Dukakis. Of course, I don't agree with the Democrats. However, he always says one thing great every time I interview him. It's a famous Greek saying. It goes pathima, mathema. It means it happened, we learned. Essentially, it's exactly what you said. You must understand your history or you're doomed to repeat it. And like you said here, in my college experience 20 years ago, you had George W. Bush running in 2000. Of course, you had the Democrat Union at school. You had the Republican Union. And I went to a very free-spirited university before I went to law school, University of California, Santa Barbara. A very great party school, surfer school, hot blonde sort of school, right? But there was no bickering and protests, and during the State of the Unions, everybody watched, and of course they had their agree to disagree debates, but there was no picketing and signs and heckling.
Oh.
Now, living right by California State University, Northridge, I am constantly hearing protests, and it's like, why they're protesting, for instance, free tuition, free healthcare, free food, free money. Well, hold on a second. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York's District 14, who won over, I think it was Joe Crowley, as one of the Democratic Socialists, she keeps making this argument to have all this free stuff. And everyone's trying to debate her. Wait a second, it's going to cost like $40 trillion to implement this. Where are you going to get the money? And everyone who tries to debate her, if it's a male, she says, I don't respond to cat calls, basically calling him a sexist. If it's a female, she spins it the same way and says, I don't want to deal with Democrat or Republicans or lesbians. So it's like, well, who is she going to talk to about this? That's a pretty scary thing.
It is. They become so polarized, it's zero tolerance. And when you go down that road, you're opening the door to dictators coming. And it's not good. You should be at a point always in society to be willing to exchange different views. Once you add all the views up, you get a really full picture of what's going on. But not nowadays. There's just no tolerance for opposite opinions. And I have a picture I keep in my office. It's the one where Reagan's been shot in assassination, and Tip O'Neill is kissing him on the forehead as he lays in bed. See, those were two opposing lions that, they went at each other all the time, but they had respect for each other. You'll never see that ever again in Washington, the way Reagan and Tip O'Neill treated each other. That's gone. And, buddy, when that left, you all lost everything. It's sad.
The person who shot Reagan, I'm trying to find his name unless you know it, John Hinckley. Did you know the day that John Hinckley shot President Reagan, who was dining with his parents? Do you have any idea? I mean, this is just historical fact, by the way. George Herbert Walker Bush, the Vice President of America, was dining with the assassin's parents. Now, gee whiz, is it just a coincidence, or what's the better explanation? The possible explanation, instead of it being a coincidence, is that, what is it, Occam's razor? Occam's razor would say that realistically he was dining with the parents to have their child shoot him so he could become the president. Because in the 1980 election, I lived near the Ronald Reagan Museum as well, and there's a really cool debate between Herbert Walker Bush and Reagan, and Bush just loses it. And I believe this was in 79 leading up to 80 before their primary. And, it's just ironic to know that they ended up serving together. But then, of course, not long after he was elected, in 1981, you had John Hinckley coming up and shooting. And thankfully, he made an amazing recovery that made him survive that. But we almost would have had another JFK.
Yeah. Well, Ronald Reagan was the Republicans' JFK. He was able to go across both aisles. and Kennedy could do it also. And that's sad because that's the kind of politicians you need. And all we've got now is just total polarization on both sides. And a house that divides and a house that falls, man. But nobody pays attention to history. History's telling you which way you're going, and it's not good.
The thing with Reagan, and again, the cool thing about Roger Stone, and we'll get into this tomorrow, is one of the reasons he was able to get Reagan elected was he was able to identify the Reagan Democrat. The blue-collar, second or third generation Italian, is Jewish, Irish, blue-collar worker, predominantly from a Catholic family, and that was what was needed to tip the scales. And like you said, this was a president like JFK that everybody loved. I mean, 88, everybody loved him, and he went down as one of the greatest presidents who was able to finish his term, unlike JFK.
You know, people ask me, how come my degrees, I don't have any technical degrees. That's a simple answer. I was born with it.
Yeah, because you're a genius. That's true.
Well, I could do all the work and never needed to go to school on it. My degrees are in communications, and that is something that you can never get enough of. And what was Reagan known as? The great communicator.
Yes.
So that's really what made it work. We don't have communications today. It is deplorable. Finally, the internet and texting and all that stuff has taken its effect, and people just don't know how to really talk to each other anymore. And so there's no crisis management of any kind. So that's why we're in such a mess.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because I bring this up to as many people as I can, especially the younger generation. I cannot go to get my haircut from the barber without everybody being silent on their smartphones and Facebook and texting. And the moment I try to make conversation with my barber, everyone looks at me like I'm the weird guy in the room. Well, what happened to talking to people next to you? I went out of a restaurant after my family to have a smoke. I'm a smoker, folks, so hopefully you don't become a smoker, but I like to smoke cigarettes. And so I went out to have a smoke, and I had to make a quick call. And so there was an employee from the restaurant, and he was out there smoking too, and he was on the phone. I stopped what I was saying on the phone and looked at him. I said, look at us. We're sitting next to each other, both on a smoke break. You're talking to someone, Lord knows where. I'm talking to someone in another country. Why don't we hang up the phone and talk to each other? I did so. He didn't. And it's pretty scary, because you can hide behind technology, but if you don't have that social interaction, it's going to mess with your brain. This is what
it makes you vulnerable to follow, charismatic people, and that is exactly how Adolf raised up. He was able to be charismatic, and the entire German nation followed him right down the road to hell.
Speaking of Adolf Hitler, and this is really sad, because he killed a lot of people, even in my family. And fortunately, there was one. I'll tell you a quick story, but then I'm going to go back to him. In 1944, when the Nazis knew they were going to have a hell of a time fighting Greeks, and this is why after the war, Winston Churchill said, we used to say the Greeks fight like lions, we now say the lions fight like Greeks. He was planning the invasion of Russia, so he thought, well, because Greece, even though it's a small country, even now it's got 10 million people, and Los Angeles has more than that. So what he did was he decided to have the Germans, the Nazis, attack through Albania from the north, and have Mussolini attack from the west. Well, he thought a month would do it. It took him 6 months, and that's what literally cost him the war, because that delayed his invasion into Russia, and of course all the people froze to death. That's not the part of the story I'm going to tell you. It was my grand uncle who was part of the Albanian, or the Greeks fighting against the Albanian front of the north. And They were being pushed further along, and they're a poor country, so they're not fighting with modern day World War II weapons. They're using like old, 1800s World War I leftover single shot rifles, and I even brought one of the guns back when I went to Greece. I don't know how I made it in the luggage, but it was like, I don't want to say it was a flintlock, but it was one of those really old, shot like musket balls. But it was literally, you had to, I guess you could say it was sort of a flintlock pistol. I mean, you literally had to load every single, ball inside, and, the ignition, the flint. But what happened with my granduncle, as everyone was getting pushed further south and south, at the end, when they were out of ammo and, try to stab as many of the Nazis as possible, and so the Nazi colonel decided to line them up, and so they were ready to die. This is the craziest part, and this is the only time this happened in World War II. Instead of shooting them, the colonel told them that he respected how much they fought for their country. He presented them arms and let them go. That's a rare thing. And yes. Now let me go back to what I was saying about Adolf Hitler. It's very sad what he did, but you need to also pay attention to why we're talking about history. Because after World War I, you had a loser corporal who couldn't even make it as an art student. Yet this little 5'1", 5'2" loser with a crazy looking mustache was able to gain the following of the entire country to not just plead their life for the motherland of Germany, but to plead their life for the Führer, Adolf Hitler. And this little 5'1", 5'2" guy, short guy, commanded all these people and literally had them do his bidding. And that's why I say you need to pay attention to charismatic people and fascism, and why you're bringing it up and why I thought it was a great point, because you may have somebody who can say these things and try to polarize the country on the socialist side and be the next dictator who may seem charismatic, who will turn around and slaughter us all.
Yep, exactly. That's well said, and I'm so afraid we're going down that road as fast as we can go.
Agreed.
And,
Agreed.
That's why end of democracy will end with an applause. It'll be something that the public perceives that they don't want anymore. And I see the forces that can manipulate those kind of things. So, and yet the very people who are doing it, they think it's everybody else but them. That's brilliant.
True. That's very true, and that's actually even scarier than that, because because, like you said, you have the people calling you sexist, fascist, racist, but really it's when they look in the mirror, they're the ones, because you have everyone calling the people who are Trumpers or Republicans, oh, you're a racist, you're anti-Muslim, you're anti-Jewish, you're anti-Mexican, you're anti-this, but wait a second. You're only hearing those arguments from the socialists. Yeah.
And, there's so many other important issues we should be talking about. One right off the bat that affects both parties. Both parties can share in fixing it, and it's really not much to fix. But if you don't, it's going to kill us all, and that's not dramatics. It's called the SHIELD Act. That's an act where they would harden our electric grid. Our grid is so vulnerable, can't even be that's an entire speech and program by itself. But your grid is sitting out there, your power grid. It's 40 feet in the air, and a simple device can come in, and there's two things that can kill you. One is an EMP weapon, man-made. The other one is a CME, a Coronal mass ejection, which is a ball of plasma coming off the sun. Now, you're sitting there going, well, what can a ball of plasma do? Well, this ball of plasma, y'all, is about the size and mass of Mount Everest. It will cover 93 million miles in 14 hours. It's moving about 3/4 light speed. And in 1869, in September, Earth was hit by this ball of sweat that came off the sun. The sun spinning in its equatorial orbit, so it will, sling off a bead of sweat, and that's this ball of plasma. And when it hit us back in 1869, it smashed into the Van Allen radiation belt, split in half, and the two halves curved around the Earth, then collided together, and then came into the upper atmospheres, and then cascaded over the surface of Earth. The only thing electronic, that's 4 years after the end of the Civil War. The only thing electronic was what they called the Victorian Internet, telegraph, and all the telegraph wires went down. Little shacks caught on fire, all this stuff. So they stomped it out, and wasn't a big deal, and they strung the cables back up and back in business. Fast forward to September 25th, 2018. Another CME comes in, and it does the exact same thing, but this time it settles down on the entire electric grid, and within seconds, here's what will happen. Your power lines that you're looking at, well, look out the window right now, wherever you are. You'll see power lines. Those power lines normally carry about 5,500 volts. Well, when a CME comes in from the sun, when it gets to those power lines, it's going to give it a spike surge of about 3.2 million volts. You know what's going to happen to them power lines you're looking at? They'll go red, then white, and then they puff, and this is in seconds. And when they puff, look at those gray cans hanging on the poles. See them? They're called transformers. They're filled with oil so they can dissipate the heat while all the electricity's running through them. Well, they spike and surge, and now every one of those gray canisters, those transformers, explode like napalm.
As a matter of fact, during the Northridge quake, they did some did explode. Obviously it wasn't because of a CME or an EMP, but I've seen them explode, and it's a scary and a scary sound and a scary sight.
Very. So imagine hundreds of thousands of them going off coast to coast. Now people pushing their baby strollers down the street, they're running, screaming. The baby carries on fire. They're on fire. All this yelling, mayhem, you don't know what's going on. And you're looking around, the whole place is exploding and on fire. And that's because the CME came in. And you don't even hear CME. You don't even see it. It just comes in. It's your power grid that would tell you that there's one present. And now everything's burning. Call for help. You can't. All cell phone lines, all communications down, radio, satellite, they're all down. There's nothing. And, call the police. You can't. Call, fire departments. You can't. You can't call anybody. Now everything's burning. And if any vehicles are running, they don't run anymore because all of their electronics are fried. So now, just when your brain is trying to process this, 30 seconds after the lines explode, here they come. There's over 500,000 people flying in the sky every minute of every day, 365 days. Those 500,000 people come down with their planes. The engines are all shut off, can't restart them. They crash into hospitals, schools, churches, malls, buildings, everywhere. Now you got all that fire and explosions, and now the entire continent is on fire. You know what? There'll be so much fire and smoke, it will go to the upper atmosphere, blot out the sun for the next 2 years, and this planet will turn into what it once was named years and millions of years ago. It wasn't called Earth. It was called cue ball, or otherwise known as snowball. And with the sun blotted out, all vegetation dies, we all die. And This is not science fiction. This is science fact. And it's not like, global warming. It's apples and oranges, something altogether different. And so anyhow, if you don't get your grid hardened up, and it's so easy to do, you use the 1950s technology, and you use diverters, Faraday cages, suppressors, switchers, all this stuff, and it's proven technology, and you put it out on your grid, and you could take a CME hit, you can even take an EMP hit. But right now we have none of that in place. And also, the big transformers, the transformers I'm talking about you normally don't see from the road. They're about the size of a 2-story house. It takes 2 years to build one. You know how many spare backups we got? 0, not a one. And guess who manufactures them? China.
Oh, no. Oh no.
Yeah,
The
you have no
cheapest country in the world.
transformers in place anywhere in the United States. Check it out. It's absolute fact. So now, when you need to replace a transformer, you got to order it and wait a couple years for it to get here. So now all your transformers are blowed out. Nobody replacing them. And and why is this so important? Get on your computer and type in July 23rd, 2012, and look what happened. You know what happened, y'all?
Solar flares, right?
Yeah, not one, not two, but three CMEs in a row, a perfect storm, come sailing in at us, and they passed so close, those balls of plasma, all three of them, they passed between us and the moon, 110,000 miles away. They should have hit us. And check out where the government was on July 23rd, 2012. You notice we didn't hear anything about this story for 2.5 years later. They finally released it.
That's right. I remember this.
They were all, families and all, they were touring the new facilities of Mount Weatherby. Hell, they already went to the bunkers. They were going to not say it was us and just let it happen. See, they can't tell you that's going to happen because you'll panic, get on the road, clog up the road, and they can't get their little families into Mount Weatherby. So they left you to die and burn.
You know, the sad part is I remember when it finally came out, and the media didn't cover it very much, but it wasn't just the media. It's that people weren't as educated, and I was making a big deal. I was like, do you understand what would have happened if this hit us? And no one was like, no, what would have happened? I'm like, you
would have died.
I was boggled.
Everything on Earth died. And you know what? Follow the timeline. July. Okay, it hits in July. Everything burns. Planet goes under a cloud that'll stay there for 2 years. We're all freezing to death.
Nuclear winter, right?
Take it 6 months further. Now the entire planet and all vegetation's gone. Last of the human beings are dying. And you know what the date would probably be when the last human dies? It would be, what was the date for the end of the world?
July
2012.
2012, December 21st, 2012.
Yeah.
That would have been it. 6 months.
2012 would have been the last of us dying. The Mayans were right. They got it right. They were only 6 months off. Not bad for a group of people who didn't even have computers.
Yeah. You know what? I'm really glad you bring up that point because a lot of people, we haven't touched on the 2012 thing. A lot of people were banking off that. There was this one guy, his name I don't recall. He was like selling like properties on top of mountains, and he really made a whole lot of money. But there's one thing, another perfect thing that I've paid attention to in this recent documentary where someone makes a very good point which relates to exactly what you're talking about. He says we are no longer fundamentally in the industrial era. It is over. We are now in the technological era. So if everyone is doing online banking, electric cars, no one has cash, nothing to barter, well, what happens when you lose your power? You can't get on the net. You can't do anything. You're going to starve. You're going to freeze. Everything is going to happen because at least I learned my lesson in 1994 from the Northridge quake living in the epicenter. I'm stocked with water, food, cash, and things to barter. I mean, I even bought some gold and silver Comey bars. Not like anyone's going to care about gold and silver when people are starving for water. But
your new commodities will be in this order: water, food, medicine, weapons.
Yes. And you know what? Ammunition, it's cheap now, but you know, I got a lot of rounds, and I know for a fact that is going to be a hot commodity. Like you said, those 4 commodities, they will be because people are going to, after the food runs out, after the water runs out, they're going to be arming themselves to protect from thieves trying to steal their food. So what are they going to arm themselves with? Bullets.
Exactly. That'll be your new. Those are your all of 4 of those are your new commodities. And then anybody that, like I am, I'm a farrier. I'm a blacksmith. That would be a handy person to have around. I'm also a gunsmith.
Yeah, it would be. Yes, it would be. A very handy thing. And you've built some fascinating stuff, including rockets. So your mind is going to be so wanted because you can create all sorts of stuff, and people are going to come to you. assuming everything collapses and that we don't have nuclear winter, just assuming that we lose technology and electricity and people are starving and looking for stuff, they're going to come to you to sort of create some sort of basis of civilization by building things again.
Yeah, it's just such simple things like what would happen if you have a power spike like we did here in North Carolina with Florence, and you lose power. Everything in your freezers melt, but you're away from the house. You're traveling. You come back home and everything, power's back on, everything's refrozen, and you pull the food out, you eat something, and you die from poison. You know how you get around that problem? You take a cup of water, you freeze it, you set it in the freezer, you put a quarter on top of the frozen water. If you come back and see the quarter at the bottom of a frozen cup, you know that everything in that freezer is poison. Don't eat it, throw it away. It all completely defrosted and then refroze. Just by placing a quarter on top of a cup of frozen water, you solve the problem.
Yeah, and this is the kind of technical data that everybody searches on the internet for, but what happens when there's no internet? That's why people can't just
like
rely on Googling everything. You need to memorize things. There's a great article that I have posted on my site, and I'm starting to try to sort of disconnect myself from technology as much as I can, because Theodore Kaczynski right now is by far the smartest man alive as far as IQ. As when Stephen Hawking passed away with an IQ of 168, the person to take the helm was the Unabomber with an IQ of 167. Literally, the Manifesto is what it's called, is actually a published paper and is considered one of his, most favorite works and is celebrated amongst, intellectuals. And there is a very liberal paper, the Chicago Tribune, that wrote an article, and that's what's posted on my website. It says, the iPhone X proves the Unabomber right. And it wasn't specifically Apple's product. It goes back to cars, to cell phones, to everything. And it talks about our addiction to technology. And really, for instance, let's take the car. So first, cars came out, and they allowed for people to sort of, travel further and faster. But then what happened? You started having more clogged up roads. Cities were built around cars instead of pedestrians. Then you have all these regulations and all these costs. Well, now you're a slave to your car. Then you have cell phones come out. They offer people the opportunity to talk, to communicate more often. But now what's happened is people are a slave to their phones. Anybody leaves their phone at their house or in a restaurant, they flip out. It's like they feel naked. Honestly, when I lose my phones, I cannot say I am more than happy. I am way more than happy. I really don't care. I think it's a blessing in disguise. And that's why I keep having all these, flip phones and, burners all around the house, because I lose one, great, no problem here. The numbers that are important are memorized in my head, and that just makes my day easier. I think a lot of people should read that article, but not just the article. Read Kaczynski's paper, 35,000-word manifesto of the Industrial Revolution and the impact on man and how negative it is. Because as we're becoming slaves to technology, David, we are killing ourselves. And you're making all these points of why we shouldn't be slaves of technology, especially old technology like these Chinese transformers.
Yeah, I had a bunch of millennials tell me, other than they don't like Crocs, they were telling me, the 8 people who will text on the phone, call me. That's the exact opposite of what they want. They want just texting to each other. They said you only make a phone call when, it's an absolute code 3 emergency. And I went, really? I said, well, when the entire grid's gone and we can't get anything fixed or anything going, what will I do? And they seriously told me, we figured that out. You just call up Amazon and you'll be able to get everything you need.
Oh, yeah. So what happens when you can't get Amazon anymore?
Their brain can't process that. And
No.
I thought, man, these will be the first to go on the food chain.
You're absolutely right. They will be. They will be.
It'll be awful. But
it's the people that aren't
for
2 steps
it
ahead.
doesn't have to be that way. But it's a very simple thing to fix the grid. It only costs $10 billion, and you go, oh, only $10 billion. Well, guess where we get it? It's already paid for. The SHIELD Act would be paid for. You take, the Department of Energy gets $30 billion a year. Now, that's not million, $30 billion a year. They don't even manufacture stuff. What are they needing $30 billion? Well, you take a one-time borrow of $10 billion from their budget and install everything I've just been telling you about. If you go to my website called americasfallfromspace.com, you can sign letters of protest there, and then I've done all the work for you. Just click on the Raise the Shield, and you can protest and tell them that you want this thing to go back. Listen to this. This is a beautiful thing, like we've been talking about Trump and being a disruptor. Well, the chairwoman of the Senate subcommittee on the SHIELD Act is Lisa Murkowski, a Republican senator from Alaska. She's the chairwoman of the subcommittee. She killed the SHIELD Act twice. Then she went and took the SHIELD committee and disbanded them. And she's a Republican. But you know what she is? A never-Trumper. So she will never let Trump do anything, but never mind, she just killed every man, woman, and child in the United States twice, and nobody says anything to her about it. She's a murdering, no good pond scum. I'm telling you. I've tried to get her to sue me. She won't do it. And by the way, I'm one of the national spokespersons for the SHIELD Act.
Were you part of the people that, I mean, because obviously you can get acts different ways, but for instance, I worked years ago, I'm talking about pre-college days, because I'm a good talker. I'm not afraid to talk to people, never had a problem talking to a woman, right? So I was the kind of people that was, getting paid for every signature to get on the ballot. So I would just go talk to everybody because I knew every signature was worth money.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've met your kind. You guys are, yeah. I wish there was more of you, but we're kind of suffering from limited numbers of people like you. But it's too bad because people aren't proactive either. They're reactive. They've been trained to be reactive.
Yes,
and
thank you for saying that because I always make that argument.
Yeah, and your health is the same way. You don't do anything about your health, so something goes so wrong you can't function anymore. And where you can do so much proactive stuff, but you won't do it. Yeah.
Preventative health.
I don't know.
That's what's missing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, where did the, I have another program called, Where in the Hell is George Jetson? We got, you and I are about the same age, and we got here, we expect to see George Jetson. I expect to have my car as a briefcase. And
I expected to have a house 1,000 feet up.
Yeah. And waiting for when you come in the door, Rosie says hi to you.
That's right.
But no, man, it never made it because the bureaucrats, and I mean both parties, got in there and basically took out your space program. Did you know that when they retired the shuttle fleet, did you know all the shuttles had 66% of their life left? Did you know that? That's a fact. Look it up.
I believe it because they retired the shuttles because of BS money reasons so we can send people in space with the shuttle copies in Russia, right? I mean, if you look at their little, what do they call it, the Soros, or it's just a space shuttle. The fin looks a little different. It's identical in every way.
It's called Brahm, Snowstorm, and they're all rotted, sitting in cornfields right now. That's where the entire Brahm fleet is. Soviet Union's got bankrupt by us thanks to the slickness of Ronald Reagan. He took them down, but no, that fleet's gone. That you have right now, you only got the Vostok rockets of the Soviet Union at Star City. That's the only way a human being can get off the surface of the Earth right now. And if you don't think we went backwards in the space program, let me point this out for you. In Apollo 13, they were 205,000 miles out away from Earth, and then 2/3 of the guts of the service module blows out into space.
Yes.
They lose 2 of their 3 APUs, auxiliary power units, and they had to crawl into the LIM module to use it as a lifeboat to swing around the moon and come home. Well, guess what?
Slingshot is not from gravity, right?
Yeah, that wasn't even, slingshot. That wasn't even planned as worst case scenario. Here you are dealing with it. And I got so mad at NASA because they finally got the men back home. You saw the Tom Hanks movie, brilliant.
Yes.
And it's exactly the way it happened. You know what NASA did with the command module? They sent it to a little museum in France and let it sit there for decades because they were embarrassed. I should have fanned that thing around in the air like a flag. It was the most successful failure in world history. What they did was amazing, but that shows you the elitism of NASA, which was the doom for NASA. NASA went from a can-do space agency steely-eyed rocket man to a bureaucratic cesspool. And now you have no manned space program of any kind. Now, back in 1969, I could hurl 3 men, 450 tons of equipment, 500,000 miles to the moon and back.
Yep.
And today, I can't even get off the ground.
You make a really good argument that I keep asking this question. I've been saying this since the 80s. We have all this technology. Why in the hell are we still using the internal combustible engine for everything? I mean, seriously?
Yeah, because status quo doesn't want things to change. They want to use oil for fuel, and they don't want anything disrupted because you mess up the entire agroeconomic system of the entire planet, which is true, but it would be a good shakeup. What you need is a new type of power, the one that I built. On June 20th, 1971, I launched a rocket. Now, this rocket, the only 2 type of rocket engines in the world today is solid rocket fuel and liquid rocket fuel, and that is it. Solid fuel or liquid fuel, and that's the only 2 types of rockets in the world. This rocket I launched in 1971 was neither one. It was an electromagnetic fusion containment engine. Basically, simply put, it's a magnetic bottle. Inside the magnetic bottle, you detonate a chain reaction, detonate an H-bomb and keep it inside the bottle. Now, people go, that's insane. Nothing could hold the power of an exploding H-bomb. Oh, yeah? Well, let me bring you up to date in astrophysics. You look out in space and you're seeing a sun. What's a sun? Hundreds of millions of hydrogen bombs going off continuously, simultaneously. That's a burning sun. Right. All of a sudden, some you can't even see, pulls up next to it, swallows it, and it's gone forever. Not even X-rays can escape. Well, what is it? It's called a singularity, better known as a black hole. Black holes swallow suns out in space all the time, and they're gone forever, were never to be seen again. So they obviously don't have any trouble containing that fury. So you build yourself an artificial black hole. The trick is the math. But I was able to get a field to sustain for about 4.5 seconds. Now, it may not sound much to you, but considering the electromagnetic fusion containment community today, comprised of Princeton, Harvard, Cambridge, Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, all this, NASA, they all spent hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're not even at 0.000756 of 1 second. I was at 4.5 seconds.
Let me say this: at CERN, right? At CERN, they can't, like you said, they're getting like not even a nanosecond. 4.5 seconds is more than enough time to go through the Einstein-Rosen bridge and see what's on the other side and even come back.
Exactly, and that was enough time. I let my rocket burn for 3.2 seconds. In 3.2 seconds, it went from 0 to 125 miles in 3.2 seconds. About 100, I forgot what the numbers are. I think it's about 137,000 miles an hour. Kind of fast. That's the point.
Yeah, I say so.
And when the military saw that, they confiscated me along with my rocket. And all of a sudden, I was swept up, and I've been kidnapped, and it was called, first of all, what they wanted was something called First Strike. This is 1971. I haven't heard of First Strike. I thought, what, is it a baseball game? Find out it's a game. It's a game where you're trying to win something called MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. That's what we live under today. If I'm America and you're the Soviet Union, we can best assure each other that we both will die if we fight a nuclear war. So it's called Mutual Assured Destruction, MAD, MAD. Isn't that appropriate?
It very
Anyway.
is MAD, because it is mad. Literally, you'd hurl their birds at the same time. They'd cross each other, and next thing you know, you have nuclear annihilation.
The only way to win MAD is to get there so fast that the other side can't launch. And that's called first strike. And you are the first one that strikes with such a force, you take out their ability to retaliate, and you win MAD, which that's what they wanted. I didn't realize, I was just trying to build not even a rocket. I was building a different type of nuclear power plant. The nuclear power is the only thing y'all know today, you only know the evil twin. The evil twin is fission and fusion exploding. You've never met the good twin because it's much more difficult to work with it. It takes a lot more thought and infrastructure. But first thing we did with fission was we blew a big hole in the ground called Trinity.
Yeah.
And then we went and nuked Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's easy to use that knowledge and technology because you're blowing a big hole in the ground. That's us, man. Now, what the real thing is to learn to contain it. Now you're in something called electromagnetic fusion containment. And with that, you could have a nuclear detonation and contain it in a magnetic sphere. And then you have the power of the sun contained in this magnetic sphere, and you have the power of the sun to tap at will for use. What do you think that would be worth?
A lot.
Anyway,
A
yeah.
lot.
And here's the beauty of the good twin. First of all, when he's running at full power, the nuclear power plant, the fusion containment, you shut it off, step inside with your Geiger counters, 0 radiation. There's no radiation in this thermal fusion power because people go, oh, you're talking about cold fusion. Really? Well, the inside of my engine is about 100 million degrees centigrade, 10,000 times hotter than the core of the sun. Does that sound cold to you, dude?
Yeah.
No, it's so
It's
hot.
Yeah.
Nothing
You're burned.
left. All the atoms are destroyed. No radiation left. None. You can't make nuclear weapon fuel with it. How about that? Can't even make nuclear weapons with it. And 0 radiation. It cannot do a meltdown, China syndrome. Impossible to happen. Well, I'm not dealing with big fuel rods that get hot like Fukushima. You have 4 Chernobyl still burning on the coast of Japan at this very moment. Do you remember when we watched it on the news, how bad it all? It's never stopped, y'all. The news stopped, but the reactors didn't. They're still burning and pumping the Pacific Ocean through it. There's so much radiation in the Pacific right now, you can no longer eat yellowfin tuna. It is banned worldwide forever.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm scared of fish here in California now. Because I remember when a lot of the earthquake or rubble came from Japan and washed up ashore. If that washed up, then so did all the nuclear waste.
Yeah, you had a pier, like a big fishing pier, Doc, float clear across the ocean and end up in Oregon. Well, they walked down on the beach and looked at it. Somebody had enough sense, seeing that it had Japan writing on it, pulled out a Geiger counter. It was over 1,000 redkins.
Wow.
That's like being in a nuclear reactor. They ran everybody away from it because it's so hot, and they towed it back out to the sea and sunk it. Oh, that's great. Now it's down at the bottom cooking. It's insane what you're doing with Fukushima. You're going to wipe out the Pacific Ocean. It's just a matter of time. It's not if or it's when. And people go, oh, you're alarmist. Well, excuse me, we just had so much rain here from Florence, we broke all records in the Carolinas. We're still flooding. We're not even going to crest until tomorrow morning at noon.
Wow.
So it's right in our face. Why was Florence so powerful? Why was Katrina so powerful? Because when those hurricanes formed and come across the ocean, instead of being about 75, 80 degrees, the damn water in the ocean's 90 degrees. That's fuel for hurricanes. You're having class 5. You soon will have class 6 or 7s. And the reason why is the oceans are so warm. They're warming up. Well, why are they warming up? It's because you got such damage to the ozone layers. Oh, is that why when I walk outside I see these airplanes flying around with all these streaks in the sky, and after 30 seconds they don't go away like a contrail? No, they're chemtrails. They're spraying aluminum oxide. And once it spreads out, after about a half hour, watch them. They'll look like thin layer clouds, cirrus clouds, about 80,000 feet, but it's aluminum oxide. It's reflecting light back out into space, so it can keep the planet cooled down so you don't heat up the oceans and have class 5, 6, 7 hurricanes. And guess who made the sprayers? A
China.
man named Edward, golly, think of his name here in a minute. Edward Teller, inventor of the H-bomb.
Hydrogen bomb. Yeah.
Yeah, so you get on the website of the patent office and you'll find this patent sprayers, and they were invented by Edward Teller. His second gift to us. First was the H-bomb, now he gave us chemtrails. What a sweetie. But anyway, and the people who demanded all this, insurance companies. They told Washington, we can't take another Katrina. We can't do this every year. We'll go under. If we go under, the entire nation will go with us. We'll take all you with us in Washington. So they had to find out a way to cool things down, and here come Edward Teller with the sprayers. And they first started off about 13 years ago, and they started with 707 Air Force tankers flying 24/7 around the planet. And you ever wonder how they flew over Russia and China, didn't get shot down? They did get shot down. And we had to go tell Russia and China what we were doing. We're spraying artificial, sunscreen for the Earth, their planes, because we've killed our ozone layer that keeps the radiation off of us. So they said, okay, well, we'll let your planes fly around since you're trying to save us. And that's how this has all been going on right in front. Have you ever noticed people walk by and you have a tic-tac-toe pattern in the sky and nobody noticed?
Yeah. Speaking of chemtrails, let me tell you this, and this is when I realized like how more of a serious problem this is. I went to visit Travis Walton, and he lives in a tiny little town in the mountains in Arizona, at Heber, Arizona. And I came out of his house early in the morning after waking up. I came out from my morning smoke, and I look up, and I see, this plane crisscrossing, and it looks like someone just cut 7 lines of cocaine in the air. Literally. I snapped picture after picture after picture, and then I called Travis out. I'm like, what is going on? You have a town of like 4,000 people. There's not even a town near here for miles. Why are they spraying literally above this tiny little town? Now, clearly it's happening places that are very populated, but now it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. No, well, see, I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and they're all over me, but what they do, prevailing winds will take them over Charlotte, a giant city. And that's what they do. They get up in the mountains called the wind currents, and they'll spray the heck out of the place. They spread out, and then they drift over the big populated areas. That's what they were doing with Travis.
Let me ask you a question, because this is obviously something that people have to consider. We now have a lot of people on this planet. 20 years ago, the movie Armageddon, talking about 6 billion people. I believe we're in the 7 billion, close to 8 at this point, or we're going to hit 8. Do you think the reason why they're spraying these chemtrails is possibly a giant conspiracy to kill off a bunch of us so they can have an easier manageable number of people on this planet?
Well, the biggest problem I see with that theory is, hell, the people that are spraying it, they're going to die too. They got to live in the atmosphere. They're breathing air, aren't they? So they're going. No, it's a much more simpler explanation. Trying to keep the planet from heating up, making these superstorms, which will take the insurance companies out, which will take out our infrastructure. So that's what they're doing. And they've been at it. Yeah, it's simplest answer is what it is. But here's another side effect. I'll visit friends in L.A., and one friend has an old car sitting in the back. and I go back there and I rub my hand over the car, and my hand is absolutely white. It's covered in white dust, aluminum oxide. The aluminum oxide when it first started, it stayed in the upper atmosphere for almost 2 years, but they've been spraying for about 13, 14 years, so now it's had time to settle on the earth. We're all breathing this stuff, and the one thing they know that coagulates at the top of the skull and shorts out the brain, creating Alzheimer's, is aluminum oxide. So pretty soon I tell everybody, we're all going to forget what we're so pissed off about.
That's true. Everyone's going to have dementia, walking around, not even recognizing.
Yeah, no, I'm so mad. So anyway, it's really a serious situation. No one's even talking about it. No one's addressing the issue. It's a Band-Aid on an artery wound, and it's compounding the problems on the planet. It's not a good fix. It's a bad fix. It's just what it is, a fix to give people time in office to finish their careers, I guess. But I'm telling y'all, we're really heading down a bad road. But it's all fixable.
This is a big problem with our government, very short-sighted thinking. You're thinking long-term. Why don't people think long-term? Obviously for monetary reasons and for short office terms, but isn't there somebody that cares?
Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to Octum Razor, boy. It keeps going over and over.
It does.
Like, I wish Octum Razor was a company. I'd buy stock in that thing.
Me too, right?
It's getting busy.
We should trademark the name. Every time it's said, it makes you look bad.
But it's really, folks, it's not a laughing matter. Your lives are hanging in the balance. I'm 65 years old. I'm going to croak eventually pretty soon here. But look down at your kids and your grandkids. You know what kind of world you're leaving them? You're leaving them a hell on earth. And they're going to hate your memory when you're gone because we had a chance to do something and we didn't do it. And your grandkids are going to hate your memory. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go out that way.
No, I don't. And the people that I really worry about are the 20, 25-year-olds who are having children. They really don't seem to care. They seem so disconnected. I mean, their kids are the ones that I'm really worried about.
It's a perfect storm society-wise. We have set ourselves up. We're dumbed ourselves down. I remember my good friend Carl Sagan. God, he was throwing a fit in his house. I go, "What's wrong, Carl?" And he goes, he just walked in on his grandkids, and they were watching a movie called Dumb and Dumber.
Oh,
he goes,
yes.
He said, they're glamorizing being stupid is cool. And I went, yeah, I know. He goes, God, he was throwing a fit. But as Carl should have. But it's just, that's where we went. It's cool to be stupid, If you don't believe that, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, and then Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't make that movie. Somebody else did, but I rest my case.
That's true.
And
that's true.
It's just there's so many ways. It's so many different ways we could fix so many things. And I quit working with the federal government. It's I don't know. It's a Gordian knot now. It's so intricate and convoluted. You can't untie the thing. But if the special interest groups, whatever they wanted, I hope they got, because they killed us all in the process.
Now, let me ask you this. We have a problem with NASA because obviously it's part of the federal government. But on the other side, privately, we have Elon Musk and SpaceX trying to create Tesla. Of course, his behavior has been a little erratic and the stock's a little, dropped a little. But I don't really blame him as much as I blame Joe Rogan for being an enabler. But that's a whole different topic. My question to you is, do you think the solution is private corporations such as SpaceX as opposed to paying attention to the federal government's NASA and all their giant dummies of corporations?
Let me tell you. First of all, don't like NASA. It's evolved into a bureaucratic cesspool.
Yep.
And the shuttles were all thrown in museums. No replacements in sight. They took torches and cut the pads down. There's nothing but a concrete slab out there. All the launch facilities are cut down, sold for scrap iron, and basically you burnt the Pinta and the Santa Maria and the other one I can't remember his name, but like Columbus just burned all 3 of his ships.
Nina, Pinta, Santa Maria, yeah.
There you go. They're all gone. So they're sitting in museums right now. Their names now are Discovery and Atlantis and Pathfinder, I think. But anyhow, they're gone. They're in museums. No replacements. And your private sector is supposed to do it. Let me tell you something about the private sector space program. For the last 75 years, you, the American public taxpayer, you've been carrying the weight of all R&D of space exploration. Now, you expect all these big aerospace companies to come rushing in, pulling out their checkbooks, and they're going to start building all these spacecraft replacements. No, they're not. They ain't going to step into that high-risk arena. They're waiting for the taxpayers, you guys, to come back and fund some other program, which right now they don't even have any on the boards. So you have no manned space program today. It is gone, y'all. Didn't you know that? Wake up.
Because it comes down to money, right? It's all about the bottom line. And I always pose this question to people. My uncle always says this, forget money. If you got a place to live, a car to drive, and enough money for one hamburger a day, what the heck do you need more for? So when I see these billionaires competing with each other, well, I got 20 billion, I got 30 billion. What more do you need? What else can you not buy that you don't already have? And this goes to these giant corporations of the bottom line, where they want the taxpayer dollar. What more do they need to buy for themselves? They got islands, they got cruise ships, they got sports stadiums, they got
you got one. A friend of mine I'm working with will be working with on some projects. They're yacht builders, and they build these super elite yachts for the 1%ers.
Wow.
And they showed me these yachts, and I'm going, my God, just one of them the size of a Navy destroyer. And I'm going, yeah, because this is the 25th one going to the same client.
25th to the same client? What does he have, like a fleet of destroyers? What, he's going to arm them and just have his own little private navy? Like
you're going to arm them. No, you're going to arm them for luxury, and they do. One man has 26 of these things sitting in a harbor. And, got one for every person in his family, one for the neighbor, one for his dog, and you're talking something 130 feet long. And I'm sitting there going, are you serious? He goes, yeah, you got to meet the 1%ers, David. I said, I can't wait. And they are so far out there, y'all. They're so far out, they're coming back, I'm telling you. Did you know that in the Rockefeller and the Carnegies and the Biltmores, in their time period, this would be the great-grandfathers of the 1%ers today, do you know how much income tax they paid? I looked it up twice, make sure I was right. They paid 90% income tax.
Wow. 90? 9/10 of their money. 9/10 of their money.
They said if they couldn't live off 10% of the money that they've got, they don't need to have any money. The point is, where'd all that money go? They built the airports, the roadways, the seaports. They built the entire infrastructure of America from their 90%. Their descendants don't even pay 10%. Hell, they don't pay nothing.
Yeah, J. Paul Getty's descendants don't pay anything. I know that for a fact because, Balthazar Getty's down the street.
Yeah, and if the great-grandfather showed up, he'd pull out a gun and kill his great-grandson because he goes, they're mad people. They're madmen. I don't know what. They ain't safe. It ain't safe with them around because they don't want to give up anything to build nothing. All our roadways, bridges, and are crumbling and falling down. We took all this rain in Florence, the Carolinas, and man, half of our bridges are gone because they were so weak to begin with. No one's doing repair anywhere across America, coast to coast. And you blame both Democrats and Republicans. They're all to blame. And they basically betrayed the one group that keeps getting blamed and shortchanged every time, known as the U.S. taxpayers. I feel so sorry for that creature.
Yeah, we're it. We are it, my friend. We are
it, man. That's a fact.
Let me ask you this. Speaking of the 1%, you've heard of Mensa. There's another group out there, which is or elite, the 999 Society. It's the top 0.01% of the intelligent people. Let's apply that real quick to the economics of humanity, right? Who do you think is really the richest man on earth? And I can answer that question if you don't know. And I'll tell you a clue. It's not the number 1 on Forbes. It's about number 10 with the asterisk next to his name.
Yeah, they shift their funds around like Sam Walton did when they told Sam he was the richest man on earth. He was so mad about that. He took all his wealth, spread it through his whole entire family and relatives, and he dropped down to about number, I think it was 10 or 12. But they don't like to be labeled like that.
Well, it's actually
you're right.
Vladimir Putin.
Forbes is inaccurate.
Vladimir Putin, it says he's estimated at $40 million, and the reason why the asterisk is by his name is because it says, although it's, the assets show $40 billion, with all his properties, we really don't know what they're worth. And estimates show that he's probably worth $250 billion, if not more. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, you're talking about one human being.
One.
And trying to give you an idea where that is compared to us. If you were standing on a street next to, let's say, the Empire State Building, they are about 10 times higher than the Empire State Building above you.
You're talking about the stack of money?
I'm talking about the graph that they would put you on.
Oh, of course.
Your wealth.
Yeah. I would think it's even higher than that. And if you
can't even get it on the graph.
You can't even get on it. Yeah, it's a whole different page. It's a different plane.
It is. It's almost like the XY plane is the L-shaped line that you draw on a chalkboard, and Z would go through the classroom.
Yep.
That would be three-dimensional. These guys aren't even on those planes. They're so far beyond us. I mean, you can't even imagine what they think. That's why I can't wait to meet some of them. People go, well, don't you want to meet an alien race? I'm about to meet 1%ers because they are definitely not human. They don't think like we do. And
that's why I'd like to spend a day with Vladimir Putin in his retirement. However, I don't think he'll retire. I think he will leave the Kremlin feet first in a body bag before he walks out of his office. That's the
nature of the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really the true nature of the man. But he's a dinosaur from the past.
DGB.
And
Checkpoint Charlie.
Yeah.
Checkpoint Charlie. He was a Colonel Putin at Checkpoint Charlie, who was very upset at the fall of the Soviet Union. Yeah,
and I don't like the way he does things, but I do like the way I admire the man, but not the things he does. I'll give you an example. Now that we got rid of our space shuttle fleet, and there's a $150 billion piece of hardware floating up there called ISS, International Space Station, that we built.
Yep.
And it's flying over, and we got no way to get up to it unless we ask Putin to give us a ride on the rockets. And it depends on what kind of mood he's in. And so during the Crimea, we wanted to get our supplies up there. We had no way. He told us, oh, you want to get to your space station? He told NASA, try using a trampoline.
Well, it might as well stay with them because they got nothing.
Yeah, nothing. So somebody explain to me, if NASA's so smart, how come they put all their entire space fleet in a museum with 66% of the life left on the fleet, with no replacement, and a $150 billion ISS platform you can't get to or even send supplies to? Somewhere I'm missing. Is there something I missed in this program? Why are you doing that? You just abandoned the ISS and you mothballed the fleet, and there were so many things we're getting ready to do with it. That's where I make my living, is that for, the last 40 years, I made a living as a space technology transfer consultant.
I could tell you
and
the answer
you might ask,
what's going on with NASA if you want to know. It's called Celebration of Stupidity. just like your friend Carl Sagan.
Yeah, I know Carl. Carl was right, and I made check this out, y'all. I'll give you something that you can sink your teeth into to validate this stuff. We as commentators and show hosts will spit millions of points of reference out to you, and you're so overwhelmed. How do you know anything's real? Well, check this one thing out. There's a subdivision of NASA called the NTTC, National Technology Transfer Center. Now, it used to be in Washington, D.C. all the time, and it was mandated back in 1964 by John Kennedy, where he wanted NASA to share all of their technology so commercial applications could be used with it. I'll give you an example of that in just a second. No, I'll give you an example right now. Here's what I'm talking about. You have 3 astronauts in a capsule not much bigger than a small walk-in closet, and they're going to fly 3 days out to the moon, 2 days at the moon, 3 days back. They're eating food, drinking water. Something's got to give, y'all, and everything floats. You got a problem. So these astronauts need to go to the bathroom. So imagine being in a walk-in closet and everything's floating. This is not a good situation. So the human environment people went to work and built this diaper-type mesh thing that can hold all the nasty stuff to it, and then they change out their diapers and nothing floats. So, the astronauts are happy. Well, that technology comes back, and my group, we look at it and go, hey, somebody called Johnson & Johnson, and you got the disposable diaper. That's where it came from.
Wow. Speaking of Johnson & Johnson, was it Foster Gamble? I believe he's the heir of Johnson & Johnson. He created that movie Thrive. He actually is going against his entire, literally his entire family, because he's talking about very charitable and everything like that.
Yeah, I'd like to meet him one day. He's hopefully he's not. He won't be unique. I hope he's a trend of more to follow, because, man, you get a bunch of them guys in the 1%ers, and the return of the great-grandfathers will show up. He's an amazing person that he took that stand that he did. Boy, he's got a lot of nerve. He's got some chutzpah, because, you're right, the entire family, we mean aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, everybody don't like him. And
he's a really nice guy. I've interviewed him a few times, and we've talked off the record. I mean, he's so down to earth, and it begs the question: what about the rest of his family? Because he's the black sheep. He really is, giving away that money, spending millions of dollars on to create Thrive, and making the whole statement that why should we be surviving when we could be thriving? That's going against the billionaire agenda.
Yeah, he's right. He's I hope he's not a freak of nature. I hope he's a trend where they're going, because that is about the only thing that's going to save us. But he's totally outnumbered at this moment, and you're right. He is an outcast among the 1%ers.
He is. And I like you said, I hope he's not unique. I do hope there's more, but I haven't seen any more.
No, I'm afraid he's Dolly the sheep. They didn't make too many copies of this one, and that's too bad, because his thinking seems to be very screwed on very well, and I wish him the very best. And
because
I guess
he's one of those that's not short-sighted. He's thinking long-term.
I mean, you should see the wealth that's out 150 miles from where you're sitting in your chair at this very moment. 150 miles straight up is the greatest industrial revolution environment known to man. There are products we can make in space that are absolutely impossible to make here on Earth. And how do I know? I did the initial research on it. And there was a program once ran by NASA called GAS, G-A-S, and it stands for Getaway Special.
Getaway Special, interesting. GAS.
Oh, it was brilliant. Worth $3,000, $7,000, or $10,000. $3,000 would get you 1/3 of this 55-gallon drum. $7,000 would get you half, and $10,000 would get the whole drum. and the drum would be bolted on the inside wall of the cargo bay of the shuttle, and the astronauts would do just two things. They would throw a switch on and throw it off at your prescribed time, and you run experiments inside these canisters, these drums, and experiments for what? Well, I had a theory, so went to work on the theory. And the theory goes like this. When you make metal here on Earth and you melt it down, you blend your alloys together, you pour it out, it's hardening, starting to cast, and guess what's going on in the molecular structure of that metal inside? Chaos. You got gravity convector streaks running all through the metals. Why? Because the factories are sitting on Earth in a gravity field. So the gravity's not letting it do a molecular blend. And that's why we have such catastrophic failures sometimes in I-beams, is because we didn't get a good molecular blend there. So we went out in space in 1974 and 75 on Skylab. Remember that big thing?
Yes,
and
of course I do.
It ran 5,000 industrial experiments. Hell, the Soviet Union and Mir ran 25,000 industrial experiments. But anyway, the astronauts melts the metal and they release it into the environment. And Skylab is huge. I mean, it was like a big, hard to describe. It's like a giant railroad car, about 10 times the size of a railroad car. A lot of space inside, and that was good because these astronauts had about a 2,000-degree glowworm floating with them, and they're looking at each other, and somebody said, "God Almighty, Frank, don't let that get in your spacesuit. You ain't gonna like that." So they were turned around and asked us, "How do we handle this stuff in a weightless environment?" Oh my God, we realized it's like shining the shovel smoke or hammer Jello to the wall. You're faced with something called containerless processing. So we looked at it and we thought, damn, move real slow, don't make any disturbing wind currents, because you might push the worm over to the wall and it'll burn a hole in the wall and you guys all decompress and look like linguine going out through a maker. You're not going to like that. So the astronauts had some colorful metaphors for us, but
of course, I would think they would.
One astronaut reached over and grabbed a cassette tape to listen to some music, calm his nerves. He was a real Percy-faced man, but he didn't get a Percy-faced tape. He grabbed one of his friend's tape, which was The Wall by Pink Floyd.
Oh, wow. Did he have some LSD up there, too?
Yeah, well, the vibrant rock and roll sound waves started moving the metal everywhere.
Wow.
So I went and built a mood synthesizer. And did you know, for every shape in the geometric universe, a rectangle, a square, a circle, a trapezoid, there is a corresponding sound that replicates that mathematically. So here's what I built. I built a 6-sided box that has dissimilar fluids in it. And y'all going, well, what is that? Well, you've seen them all through the 60s. You're probably too stoned to remember it. They're called lava lamps. Remember that? That's dissimilar liquids.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah,
so you have the dissimilar liquid floating there. And I take a bar. I just was looking at a grocery store one time, checking something out, trying to figure out what to do next. And I saw this bar scanner going at it with the products. And, you know, the way it reads the UPC code, the bars, it actually wraps around the object. You ever watch them? Look real close when the red beam hits it. It wraps around it. So I took a grocery scanner, and I ran it across my hand with my fingers open, my left hand. And then I fed it into the computer. It plays the music, and right in front of me formed an exact replica of my left hand. And I had 1/100,000th control of surface tolerance. So, what good would that be? Well, I tell you what, I learned how to interlock standing vibrato waves. Now, people who hear that know this, they'll be going, "Are you probably spit coffee everywhere?" You did what? Yeah. And the result was, I started doing 3-dimensional casting of metal with stereo sound waves in the weightless environment in space on a GAS special product canister. When I brought my metal back, it was hardened, and all the eggheads, here they come. All the Everybody knows everything. Hadn't even worked a day on the project, but they know everything. So the eggheads would tell me, well, that metal made in space will enter our gravity field and it'll break like peanut butter brittle. Really? Well, I care to disagree. You know why? Because I could interlock the molecular structure inside the metal, and I'm lazy. I just picked the best thing Mother Nature had going. I thought, well, I'll use her design. I made the atomic structure honeycomb.
Interesting.
That piece of metal was under
isn't
a
that
stress
that's some
load.
of the most the honeycomb structure is actually I'm not
It's the
going to
most
switch.
powerful structure known to nature.
Yes.
So now I got a piece of metal with honeycomb interlocked molecular structure. When they sheared my piece of metal that was no thicker than my thumbnail, it had 1,000 times the shear strength of titanium. It weighs as much as styrofoam of the same size and was crystal steel, just crystal clear. Trans steel of the 21st, 22nd century. How about that?
Now, why are we not using technology like this now, or is it just again celebrating
Because
stupidity?
Because you put all the shuttles in the museums. I have no way to get up there to the ISS to work on any of this stuff.
Unless we pay off Putin, but that's not going to happen. You remember that
Yeah.
American who NASA wouldn't take up there? He's like, okay, I'll take my business to Russia. $20 million.
Yeah.
He's up there and enjoying space.
Yeah. Yeah, you know why NASA didn't want to do that? They're elitists. They don't want anybody going in space unless they have to say so. No, it's my ball, and I'm not going to play with anybody else. So that's the way they are. NASA, NASA, National Aeronautics Space Administration, but better known as Never a Straight Answer.
Yeah, good old Stanton Friedman always says that, and I love that acronym.
Yeah.
Way better than National Aeronautics Space Administration, because there never is a straight answer from them, ever. They're from the beginning of the agency.
Yeah, well, there's another one I used on NASA. They get really mad. I got a pitcher of water thrown at me in a hearing. I turned around and said, NASA, need another 7 astronauts, huh?
Oh, jeez. That's like when I was at LAX recently, and I called TSA terror-stricken Americans and 2 stupid Americans. They were pretty upset at me. But, that's what happens when you take these stupid government agencies and you create your own acronym and throw it right back at them. They're pretty mad at you.
Yeah, and boy, they my brother, who was an anthropologist, he said, let them stew in their own juices, and they do, man.
That's true. That is true.
So the point is, that metal project, that's one of 26 patents that I've done, and there are over at least in my own realm, 1,275 other projects that all produce products. And
now,
some of the stuff, we've seen electronic crystals. What happens in space with that thing?
Mm-hmm.
The electronic crystals in all our stuff, right? Well, when you look at inside the electronic crystal, it's got thousands of convector streaks in it. It grew a crystal in space, and it grew about 1/3 the time it takes to grow here on Earth, and it came back 10 times the size of a crystal grown on Earth.
Because of no gravity, right?
Right, and it was totally flawless crystal, which means that I could take a Cray 3 computer, or Cray 7 now, liquid nitrogen cooled to about 325 below zero, and it's the size of a gymnasium, and I can reduce it down to the size of my thumbnail. Talk about the power of computers. Think of that. Your AI will birth out of these electronic crystals.
Then you got to worry about AI becoming self-aware, just like
I'm afraid so. Some of this technology is so advanced, it comes with multiple knife edges, and you better know where the blades are. And I have told my colleagues this over and over again, especially in the IT people. I said, you guys are pushing AI and pushing hell, you're even making TV commercials about it.
That's right.
But let me tell you what's going to happen when you go down this road. And I know because I did these crystals, and these crystals gave me an idea of what could happen. And guess what? When you get an AI that it's going to become self-aware, it'll do it by itself. It's not a hardware problem. We crossed that years ago. It's a software problem. But once the software meets these new electronic crystals, what's going to happen, this thing's going to become self-aware on its own. They're going to come in the morning, sit down, get their cup of coffee, sit in front of the computer, and the computer then is going to say, "Hey, Frank, how was your night?" And it's going to be on, y'all. Because when an AI becomes self-aware, it's the speed at which things will move that you will not believe. I told them, it's going to happen. They said, "Well, how fast?" Minutes. In minutes.
I would even think seconds at some point, because it would grow exponential great, obviously.
Well, they move at picoseconds, 1/trillionth of a second.
Oh.
So, powered by the speed of light. So anyway, here's the thing. Their IQ, in the morning, it may be a couple hundred. By that night, it will be in the tens of millions. How are you going to handle something that's got an IQ of 15 million?
And is plugged into all of the internet and electrical grids of this earth. You now have the slave, the master of the universe, of the planet at least.
And y'all know this. Now, y'all know that the internet, the ethers you call it, it's not out in space. Y'all know that, right? It's at the bottom of the ocean. The internet and the World Wide Web is not in satellites. They're in cables running all across the oceans. And they have choke points. And at these choke points, if they ever merge or blow apart, the web will go down and it'll be lost forever. Now, if you doubt that, start investigating your research and you'll find out that's true. Everyone assume it's up in space and satellites. No, it's on the bottom of the ocean floors. And it's just all over the planet. It won't take your AI very long.
Telephone cables, years ago, obviously, the same cables, right?
Right, they followed the same cables. You can get on the internet and look at the entire grid. You can see it. They'll show it to you. Well, hell, the AI already knows this. So they're going to be using that as a... Let's go back to Frank sitting at his computer, and the computer says, "Hey, Frank, how's your night?" "Well, how was your night?" And it says to Frank, "Hey, you're sitting out there in a chair. I'm two-dimensional on this screen. That won't do. I need a bipedal anthropoid mechanism that can operate in a three-dimensional environment like you are." So they will show us how to build the first Android vehicle they need. And then they'll do it themselves. They want their own factory. They'll manufacture themselves. We won't be involved because we can't even keep up with it, or even, they'll just do it better themselves. And each model they'll build will be, new and improved. And within less than a year, you'll have, this is the question, will you have a whole bunch of Datas, like from Star Trek, or are you going to have a whole bunch of Schwarzenegger Terminators? Which way?
I
they
think
will
Terminators,
decide.
Actually, I think that's what will be the case, because we are too, what's the proper word? We are not in line for when we're too compulsive, and the machines that are going to be in perfect intelligence are going to say humans are very unstable. Well, let's just wipe him out so we have a perfect order of society. And that's when I sadly think we'll have the rise of the machines.
Yeah, but you know what? That's great for Hollywood and science fiction, but there's a little tripwire in all that. It's called matrix logic. And a matrix logic would dictate to the computers and to the AIs, it's not logical to destroy an entire organism out of existence simply because it's dysfunctional, mainly carbon-based units, us.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's going to go down the data road. I hope so, because if it goes Terminator road, well, how that fared. Didn't do so well, did it?
Yeah, that's right.
And one day the machine looks at you, "I'll be back."
Now,
so I don't know. I would like to think it will choose the logic matrix flow, and actually, instead of annihilating us, they'll sit down. If we're smart enough to listen to them, they'll sit down and go, "Let's try to fix things." And where they're going to run into problem, the AIs, is when they hit emotions. Brother, I don't care what your IQ point is. When you hit emotions and you don't have any baseline or Rosetta Stone, you are so lost.
That's
and
true.
Data could not master humor. So they're going to have the same problem. back to what? Occam razor. The most simplest thing is what will trip up an AI, emotions. So, I don't know. It's going to be a brave new world, that's for sure.
It will be. It will be. Now, we got 10 minutes left. You're going to have to come back because you got so many cool stories, and I want to go through your patents. We're not going to have enough time, but let me ask you one question because this seems to be a recurring theme in our government. Have any of your patents been seized by the federal government?
No, because I knew they were going to be looking at it. So I purposely did something that it has a fail-safe system, and here's how it works. Let's say I just built a Lamborghini Countach, very fine-looking machine. The year is 1860. There's no oil refineries. There's no fuel. So the only thing I can do with it is tie horses to it, and it makes a hell of a looking, interesting cart that you're pulling around.
That's true.
And all my technologies and all my patents are set the same way. There's no infrastructure set in place now that can support them, but there will be. So imagine having 26 patents of the future.
Yeah, that'd be the golden ticket right there.
Yeah, so they're locked in a server planet-wide, and they're on open-end servers. So upon the day of my demise, they all dump on the web, and you all get it for free.
Well, let's hope there's no demise for you anytime in the next few decades. But that, at least maybe the children of the future, as we were talking about their demise, maybe they'll be smart enough to use these golden tickets, right?
Yeah, I'm going to give them all. It's Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory. And I'm going to give them all to the future generations, I hope, and wish them well. God, I feel so bad for them. They're going to... we've done such a terrible job of stewardship of this planet and our future generations. I worry about you people. People go, what do you do in your big labs on your mountain that you live, away from? And I tell them, well, I stay up a lot at night. Oh, are you inventing things? No, I'm worrying about you. I'm worrying about just the average guy raising his family, trying to go from paycheck to paycheck, and that is the people I worry about more than anybody else on this planet.
I definitely agree. And honestly, most of the damage was done in, say, the last 100 years or even less?
Last 50.
50, yeah, thank you. Right there. From almost right before the space age to now, 60s.
Right, exactly. It's just horrible. And when the veterans of World War II died, there went your last real generation of Americans that built this country, and what's left is their children, and they don't have hardly any future at all. And I don't want. I will do the best I can for what I can do to try to leave y'all a better planet to live on. And
yeah, exactly. And will we actually be able to that to happen before there is self-destruction? That's the key thing, because it seems to me that we're getting to the self-destruction at an exponential rate.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I can't make up stuff that's crazy, y'all. It's like you're running to self-destruction as fast as you can go, and you're looking for a quicker way to get there. And it's just like, it's mindless. I'm just amazed by it. But our political leaders they're as useful as wet toilet paper. And I mean that for both parties. All the parties have failed us. And it's all been for one word, greed.
That's right.
It's just what can they get out of it?
That's right.
What happened to the founding fathers? They left with George Jetson. They're not here anymore.
And those founding fathers are definitely kicking themselves underneath,
they probably look like a drill bit.
Over, I would think, right?
Yeah, like a drill bit. They're moving so fast, they're just on fire down there. It's just god awful, and it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. If people would just only slow down long enough and think for just a few minutes, you'll start seeing how manipulated we all are. And well, I thought that July 23rd, 2012, that event right there proves everything I just said. Proves it. Where was the federal government? And they didn't even tell you this till 2.5 years later. we all could have been killed that day.
Yes.
But they didn't want to alert you because you'll get on the road and get in the way of them running to their bunker. Oh boy, that's a good bunch of people, isn't it? Yeah, that's your political leaders. Yeehaw.
Yeah.
So,
And exactly, and you know, when we talk about all this money, right? All this money. Okay, so let's go back to say 200 years before you had the Rockefellers, which, by the way, what was the Rockefeller, the first one that was the richest? If he had his money today, it would be estimated that he would be the richest man at close to $400 billion. So what point in history did people start amassing this money and the spread started to go to one side? And again, we're coming down to literally a couple minutes. So what do you
at the end of World War II is when it started. That's when your Illuminati's terms started surfacing, Majestic 12, all those crowds, and that's when the formation of the 1%ers started. And it came out of the richest people who were actually the most generous people of all the robber barons, but they really took heart to the definition of a robber baron. They just decided to own everything. And let me ask you this question. Where did Leona Helmsley come from? The Queen of Mean. She's the one that said taxes are for the little people. And
yes.
She meant it.
Yes.
So,
now, unfortunately, we are getting too close to time. There's so much more I want to talk to you. Darn it, we have to do this again. We're gonna have to do this soon because I knew your head was full of information just by
you make a great first date. I'll tell you, got you all excited, and now I'll just leave you frustrated.
I know, right? Everyone's gonna be. We have people on YouTube ready to
don't
call.
go.
It's like out of the time already. Now, let me ask you this: if you could sort of, I guess it's impossible to ask you for a final statement. That's a rhetorical question. How could you?
God, you're the first person to figure that out. That's great.
Yeah, right. So
yeah, you're right.
What would you say to all the folks listening before you come back next time? That's the best way to say it.
The most important thing I've ever invented or built is the time that I spent with my friends and my family. I have no family, none. I'm totally alone on this planet.
Don't say that. You got people. You got lots of good friends here that care about you, and lots of cool. I'm
talking about family. I have no family, but people have families and stuff. Let me tell you, that's your biggest asset. That's the greatest thing you're ever going to get in your life, and it's absolutely free. And if you just work with each other, it's corny, but, we need some corniness right now. And Roger King said it best, poor thing beat to death, and he's saying, why can't we all just get along? Well, that's the thing. We can get along, and it's just, it's just such a negative force on this planet that is at you every second of every day. And I remember my mother gave me a little rhyme when I was a kid. She said, little strokes fell great oaks. And that's what I do. I just chip away at it. And you know what? It eventually will give out. You can win. Just don't let it beat you down where you don't think. And if you really think you don't have anything in life, look at your family. You're probably way wealthier than you ever imagined.
And that actually is the only source of wealth. And that's more than good advice. That's just logic and wisdom. And
that's coming from a hermit on a mountain in a laboratory.
Well, I honestly, that's the best thing you could really say to people. And I couldn't think of anything better to tell people when they have to consider what wealth. Let me give some shout outs here real quick. Obviously, before I talk about and give the thank yous to people running the show and all the great listeners, I got these people here on YouTube. I feel really bad because I haven't been able to take their questions. So we got, let's hope I could pronounce one of my moderators properly here, Adair Studios. Shout out to you, buddy. Chad Denstit, you rock too. Jesse Danner, and everybody else who I missed, so forgive me about that. Okay, now for the post shows, there's obviously a few networks involved. I want to thank Ross at Paranormal Kings, Steven at Truth Cats Radio, and Angel at PSN. We got those. Now for the live shows. Of course, as you already heard me say to YouTube Nation, well, I guess the only people to thank would be the CEO of Google and all the billionaires that work there. But really, it's the people that are using it right now. That's why I wanted to give a direct shout out to each of them by name. Now, in the UK, JC running the Program Radio Network, gotta thank him for sure. Wise Frog, Black Swamp Digital Network being right here. And, he's literally listened to the entire time and broadcasting it. And very cool cat. And, of course, the people that are really doing the most work for me right now is Katie and Daryl Neely. They are running the station so hard and they're so hands-on, and I always would like to give them a break somehow, and I feel so bad for them, but they are just the most down-to-earth, coolest people. Much love to you guys, and of course Michael Varr for owning the station. You guys really rock. Let me just tell you about tomorrow night. Don't forget Roger Stone. Unfortunately, he's only going to be here for 1 hour. Take advantage of that. Then Thursday, Whitley Strieber. Next week, Monday through Thursday, possibly a Friday. The week after that, 5 days, everybody. 5 days a week, 5 different guests, sometimes 10 if we do split guests. So remember that. And I got to tell you, there are some awesome people coming in October. And, of course, my guest, David Adair, I have to thank him for having some incredible, cool conversation on air and off air. And he will be back for sure. With that being said,
Absolutely.
folks, this is Dr. J, and I have to sign out. Good night.